The store was quiet on a late weekday afternoon. Fluorescent lights flickered softly overhead, illuminating neatly arranged aisles. A few customers wandered through, minding their own business as the cashier behind the counter scrolled idly through their phone. Marcus Reed walked slowly down the aisle, holding a small shopping basket. He was dressed simply in a dark jacket and slacks, his posture calm and composed. He picked up a box of herbal tea, reading the label carefully before placing it in his basket. At the end of the aisle, a woman turned the corner with a sharp expression already etched on her face. Karen Miller. She was a regular at the store, known for her loud complaints and entitled attitude. Her heels clicked impatiently on the floor as she scanned the aisle, and her eyes immediately locked onto Marcus. She frowned. Within seconds, her voice rang out, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Excuse me," she snapped, marching toward him. "What are you doing over here?" Marcus looked up calmly. "I'm shopping," he replied evenly. Karen narrowed her eyes. "Shopping? Really? You don't look like you belong here." A couple of customers nearby glanced over, sensing tension. Marcus stayed still, meeting her gaze without reacting. Karen stepped closer, lowering her voice but keeping the same sharp tone. "I've seen people like you loitering around stores before. If you're planning to cause trouble, I'll have security remove you." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "I'm just buying tea." Karen let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "Right, tea. Look, I know what's going on. People like you come into nice places like this, pretending to shop, then—" She waved her hand dismissively. "We all know how it ends." The cashier at the front shifted nervously, but didn't say anything. Other shoppers stopped, pretending not to listen. Marcus took a slow breath. His voice stayed calm, almost too calm for the situation. "And what exactly do you think is going to end, ma'am?" Karen scoffed, planting her hands on her hips. "Don't play smart with me. I'm going to find the manager right now. You're making people uncomfortable." Marcus's expression didn't change. "No one here seems uncomfortable but you." Her cheeks flushed with indignation. "Oh, you're going to regret talking to me like that. I know the manager personally." She spun on her heel and stormed toward the counter, waving frantically for attention. But before she could call for the manager, the store's back office door opened. A man in a suit stepped out, his presence immediately commanding attention. The cashier straightened, and a whisper went through the few customers nearby. Karen stopped mid-step, blinking in surprise as the man walked directly toward Marcus. "Ah, Mr. Reed," the man said warmly. "I didn't know you'd be visiting today." Karen froze, because in that moment, it became painfully clear. Marcus Reed wasn't just a customer. He was someone far more important than she could have ever imagined. Karen turned sharply, her confident stride faltering as the man in the suit approached Marcus with a warm smile. "Mr. Reed," the man repeated, extending his hand. "It's always an honor to see you here. I wasn't expecting you today. What a pleasant surprise." Marcus shook his hand calmly, a faint but polite smile on his face. "Just stopping by to pick up a few things," he replied evenly. The room seemed to shift. The cashier behind the counter straightened immediately, her eyes widening. A couple of customers paused mid-step, whispering quietly to one another. Everyone recognized the shift in tone, even if they didn't yet understand it. Karen blinked in confusion. Wait, you know him? She asked, her voice losing its sharp edge. The man in the suit turned to her briefly. Of course. Mr. Reed is one of our largest investors, and the reason this store is even here. Without him, this branch wouldn't exist. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. The manager, sensing the tension, glanced at Marcus. Is everything all right, sir? I hope you haven't had any unpleasant experiences. Marcus tilted his head slightly, his gaze steady. Nothing I haven't seen before, he said quietly. Karen's cheeks burned. She forced an awkward laugh. Oh, well, I think there's been some sort of misunderstanding. I was just trying to help. I thought maybe he was lost or needed assistance. That's all. Marcus didn't respond right away. He looked at her, calm, but with a depth in his eyes that made her shift uncomfortably. The manager frowned. Karen, is it? I've seen you in here before. Are you saying you harassed one of our key partners without even knowing who he was? Karen stammered. I wasn't harassing anyone. I didn't realize. You didn't care to realize, Marcus said softly, his tone sharp without needing to be loud. You saw what you wanted to see. The words hung heavy in the air. Karen's face turned red as she tried to backpedal. I didn't mean any harm. I was just concerned about the store. That's all. The manager shook his head in disbelief. Concerned? For a man who literally owns the rights to this location? He turned to Marcus apologetically. Sir, I'm terribly sorry for any disrespect shown to you. It won't happen again. Marcus stayed silent for a moment longer before placing the tea in his basket down on the counter. Let's not make a scene, he said quietly. This isn't the first time someone's judged me by what they thought they saw. It probably won't be the last. Karen swallowed hard. I didn't know. Marcus looked at her one last time. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with basic respect. The store went silent. Karen's confident demeanor had crumbled entirely. She looked around desperately, but no one came to her defense, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her own arrogance bearing down on her. Karen stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, unable to form a response. The other shoppers, who had been pretending not to watch, now stared openly. Some whispered to one another, shaking their heads. The silence in the store was heavy, filled with an uncomfortable awareness that something had been exposed. The manager looked between Karen and Marcus, clearly furious, but trying to remain professional. Sir, he said respectfully to Marcus, if you'd like, we can handle this privately. Marcus shook his head calmly. There's no need. The lesson here is already clear. Karen flinched at his words. Please, she said suddenly, her tone shifting from sharp to pleading. I didn't mean to offend you. I thought... You assumed, Marcus corrected quietly. His gaze stayed steady on her, calm yet cutting. And in your assumption, you decided I didn't belong here. That's the problem. Karen's face flushed deeper. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking. Marcus exhaled slowly, setting his basket gently on the counter. No, you were thinking. You were just thinking the wrong things. The manager turned toward Karen, his voice firm. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store. We don't tolerate behavior like this toward any customer, let alone one of our own partners. Karen's eyes widened. You're kicking me out? I've shopped here for years. And yet, the manager said, his tone sharper now, you couldn't extend even basic courtesy to someone else shopping here. That says everything. Karen looked around, expecting someone to defend her. No one did. The cashier avoided her gaze. The other customers turned away. For the first time, she realized she was entirely alone. Marcus remained quiet, letting the weight of the moment speak for itself. The manager gestured toward the door. "Please leave." Karen hesitated, then muttered something under her breath and stormed out, her heels clacking against the tile. The automatic doors slid shut behind her with a soft hiss, leaving an almost eerie calm behind. The manager turned back to Marcus with an apologetic expression. "Mr. Reed, I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. It won't happen again." Marcus offered a faint, composed smile. "I'm not surprised by what happened, but I hope everyone here understands. It shouldn't take knowing someone's title or status to treat them with respect." The manager nodded solemnly. "You're right, it shouldn't." Marcus picked up his basket again. He didn't look triumphant, didn't gloat. Instead, he moved quietly toward the register, his dignity intact. As the cashier rang up his items, she glanced at him nervously. "I'm really sorry about what she said. We all saw how wrong it was." Marcus simply replied, "Thank you. Just remember, you never know who someone really is. So always choose kindness first." When he left the store, the air outside felt lighter. Inside, the remaining shoppers whispered quietly, not about Marcus, but about the harsh reminder Karen had left behind. And for the first time, the store felt just a little more aware. As Marcus stepped out into the cool afternoon air, the quiet hum of the city felt oddly soothing. He carried his small bag of groceries with the same calm demeanor he had maintained inside the store. To him, this was not a new experience. It was just another reminder of the assumptions people made without thinking. Inside the store, the manager stood at the entrance, watching Marcus leave. He turned back to the staff. "Let this be a lesson," he said firmly. "We treat everyone with respect here, no exceptions." The cashier nodded silently, glancing toward the doors where Karen had been escorted out. "I've seen her act like that before," she admitted softly, "but I didn't think it would ever catch up to her." "It always does," the manager replied. Meanwhile, Karen was sitting in her car just outside the store, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Her face burned with embarrassment. She had been publicly humiliated. But more than that, she now realized she had picked the wrong person to demean. She replayed the moment the manager called Marcus an investor, the way everyone in the store had suddenly looked at her with quiet judgment. She had been so sure of herself, so quick to assume. And now, she was the one exposed. Back inside, a few customers spoke quietly among themselves. "Can you believe she treated him like that?" One whispered. "Shows you never really know who someone is," another replied. "And even if he wasn't an investor, she was still out of line." Marcus, unaware of the whispers now circling behind him, walked calmly to his car. He didn't feel angry, just tired. He knew that even his status as an investor didn't truly matter. What mattered was that he'd been treated poorly simply because someone thought they could. Later that evening, Marcus arrived at his office downtown, a sleek building with his name on the top floor. As he walked into the lobby, his assistant greeted him warmly. "Mr. Reed, everything's ready for the board meeting tomorrow," she said. "Thank you," Marcus replied, his tone as calm and composed as ever. Upstairs, he sat in his office overlooking the city. He thought briefly about Karen and how quickly her confidence had crumbled when faced with the truth. He didn't plan to hold a grudge. People like her taught their own lessons simply by the way they fell apart when confronted. Across town, Karen sat at home replaying the moment over and over. For the first time, she questioned herself. Had she been wrong all along, or was she just upset that she'd been caught? Back at the store, the staff talked quietly as they closed up for the night. The incident had left a mark, not just on Karen, but on everyone who had watched. And for those who witnessed it, one simple truth remained clear. You never know someone's true identity, and it shouldn't take a title to treat someone like they matter. The next morning, the store was buzzing with quiet chatter. News of the incident had spread faster than anyone expected. Regular customers whispered about what had happened with Karen, and the staff spoke in hushed tones about Marcus's true identity. Linda, the cashier who had rung up Marcus's tea, recounted the story to her coworker. He didn't raise his voice, didn't get angry. He just stayed calm the whole time. And then the manager came out and treated him like royalty. I've never seen someone so composed while being treated so unfairly. Her coworker shook his head. That's real power. He didn't need to shout. The truth spoke for itself. Meanwhile, Karen sat in her kitchen, staring at a cold cup of coffee. She couldn't escape the memory of how quickly the room had turned against her. She had expected everyone to nod along, to back her as they always seemed to before. But instead, they'd looked at her like she was the problem. And for the first time, she realized they were right. Across the city, Marcus was already in a meeting with the executive board of the retail chain. As one of their largest investors, he had a say in how their stores were run. We've had too many complaints about customer treatment, Marcus said evenly, his tone calm but firm. I want to see new training programs implemented, not just for customer service, but for understanding people, really seeing them. One board member nodded quickly. Absolutely, Mareed. After what happened yesterday, we've already started drafting new policies. Marcus paused for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. Policies are fine, but culture is what matters. You can write all the rules you want, but if people don't believe in them, nothing changes. The boardroom went silent, everyone absorbing his words. Later that afternoon, Marcus stopped by the same store again. He didn't need to, but he wanted to make sure the staff understood he held no ill will toward them. When he walked in, the manager hurried over. Mr. Reed, welcome back. I can't tell you how sorry we are for what happened yesterday. Marcus gave a faint smile. I know it wasn't everyone's fault. Just make sure it doesn't happen to someone who doesn't have the advantage of a title. The manager nodded earnestly. We'll do better. At that very moment, Karen walked into the store, unaware Marcus was there. She froze when she saw him speaking with the manager. For a split second, she considered turning around, but it was too late. Marcus's calm eyes met hers. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The manager turned to her, his expression unreadable. Marcus didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The quiet in his gaze spoke volumes. Karen looked away, shame flushing her face. She quickly left the store, feeling smaller than she ever had before. And as the door closed behind her, Marcus picked up his tea once again. Knowing that dignity never needed to shout, Karen hurried out of the store, her heels clicking against the pavement as she made her escape. She didn't look back. The embarrassment of facing Marcus again, knowing who he really was, burned deeper than anything she'd ever felt before. Inside, the manager exhaled and turned back to Marcus. She came back today, probably hoping no one would remember, he said quietly. Marcus picked up a box of tea from the shelf, his expression calm. She remembers. That's enough. The manager studied him for a moment. You're a better man than most, Mr. Reed. A lot of people would have demanded she be banned from every store we own. Marcus shook his head slightly. What would that solve? You can't force someone to change by punishing them. They have to see themselves clearly first. As Marcus walked toward the register, a young employee approached him nervously. Sir, I just wanted to say, we were all uncomfortable when she started yelling at you yesterday. We didn't know how to react, but when we saw how you stayed calm, it made us realize we could have done more. Next time, we won't stay silent. Marcus gave her a reassuring nod. Silence protects the wrong people. Speaking up is how you stop it before it grows. Across town, Karen sat in her car, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time, she didn't see the confident, entitled person she'd always believed herself to be. She saw someone small, someone who had let her prejudice blind her, and no matter how she tried to spin it in her head, she couldn't escape the truth. Her own arrogance had humiliated her. Meanwhile, Marcus returned to his office later that day. He placed the tea on his desk, next to a stack of reports. His assistant walked in with an update. The board approved the new community program you suggested, she said. They want you to lead the rollout for all the stores you're partnered with. Marcus smiled faintly. Good. Let's make sure this isn't just a reaction to one incident. It has to be lasting. That evening, Marcus attended a small charity event for local youth programs. He spoke briefly to the audience. We often forget how powerful kindness can be, he said, and how much damage comes from seeing people as less than they are. We can't control how others act, but we can control what we choose to reflect back. The crowd stayed quiet, deeply moved. When Marcus left the event, he passed by the same store on his way home. Through the window, he saw the staff smiling, working together with ease. The tension from before was gone. Karen, meanwhile, sat alone in her dimly lit living room, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. She realized that for the first time in her life, she had been forced to confront her own reflection, and she didn't like what she saw. Marcus didn't need to punish her. The truth had done that on its own. The following morning, Marcus arrived early at his office. He set down his tea, opened his laptop, and reviewed the outline for the new community program. It wasn't just about training employees. It was about changing perspectives. He wanted stores to become places where everyone felt safe, welcome, and respected, no matter who they were. Meanwhile, at the same store, the staff was already discussing the incident from days before. Linda, the cashier, spoke quietly to her coworker. You know what stuck with me? He never raised his voice. Not once, she said. Her coworker nodded. That's what made it so powerful. He didn't have to yell. The truth just unfolded, and she couldn't escape it. As the day went on, customers came and went, and the store gradually returned to normal. But the staff had changed. They were more attentive, more mindful of their words. Even the manager seemed more aware of how small moments could define a person's character. Across the city, Karen sat in her living room, staring at her phone. She had typed and deleted several messages, one to the store manager, one to Marcus. Each time she tried to explain herself, the words felt hollow. She wasn't sure if an apology would even matter now. Later that afternoon, Marcus visited another branch of the store chain. As he walked through the aisles, a few employees recognized him. They treated him with quiet respect, not because of his status, but because they had heard how he handled himself during the incident. The manager of that branch approached him. "Mr. Reed, we heard what happened at the other location. We've already started having conversations with our staff about it. We want to make sure this doesn't happen again." Marcus gave a calm nod. It's not just about avoiding embarrassment. It's about creating a culture that doesn't allow this behavior to grow in the first place. That's where the real work begins. Meanwhile, Richard, the CEO of the store chain, called Marcus later that evening. "We're rolling out your inclusion initiative to all locations," Richard said. "You've turned a bad moment into a meaningful lesson for everyone." Marcus responded simply, "It's only meaningful if it changes how we treat people from here on out." That night, Marcus returned home and sat quietly on his balcony overlooking the city lights. He thought about Karen, not with anger, but with a calm understanding. People like her were trapped in their own narrow view of the world. Across town, Karen finally worked up the courage to write a message to Marcus. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. I judged you without knowing you, and I regret it deeply." She stared at the screen, unsure if she should send it. Marcus never expected her apology, and even if it came, he didn't need it, because the real lesson had already been learned, not just by her, but by everyone who had witnessed the truth. Karen stared at the unsent message on her phone for a long time. Her fingers hovered over the send button, but something inside her hesitated. An apology wouldn't erase the moment. It wouldn't undo the look on Marcus's face, calm but disappointed, as if he had seen this all before. With a frustrated sigh, she locked her phone and set it down. The silence in her apartment felt heavier than ever. Meanwhile, Marcus continued with his day as if nothing had happened. He met with a team of store managers to discuss the new training initiative. "This isn't just about teaching staff what not to do," Marcus said, his tone measured but firm. "It's about teaching them to see beyond assumptions, to treat every person who walks through those doors with the same respect they'd want for themselves." The managers nodded, some taking notes diligently, others looking genuinely thoughtful. After the meeting, Marcus visited the original store again, this time unannounced. The atmosphere was noticeably different. The staff greeted every customer with warmth. The cashier who had rung him up smiled nervously when she saw him. "Mr. Reed," Linda said softly, "we've started talking among ourselves about how to be better with every customer. What happened with her? It woke us up." Marcus gave a small nod. "Good. That's how change begins. Not with policies, but with people choosing to see differently." Across town, Karen sat in a small cafe, overhearing a conversation she couldn't ignore. Two women at the next table were discussing the incident. "Did you hear about that woman who caused a scene in the store?" one said. "Turns out the man she yelled at was one of the store's biggest investors." Karen froze. "They say she was humiliated. Everyone saw it. Honestly, she deserved it, the other replied. Karen's stomach sank. She lowered her gaze, stirring her coffee mechanically. It was strange hearing her own actions described by strangers, as if she were just a cautionary tale now. Meanwhile, Marcus was finishing his quiet errand at the store. As he left, a young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, is that the man who owns the store?" Marcus smiled gently and crouched down slightly to the boy's level. "No, I don't own it. I just help make sure it's a good place for everyone." The boy nodded seriously, as if absorbing an important lesson. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his office, overlooking the city skyline. He thought briefly about Karen, wondering if she had reflected on her behavior, but whether she did or didn't wasn't his burden. He sipped his tea quietly. Across the city, Karen opened her phone one more time, staring at the unsent apology. She finally hit send. But Marcus, already at peace with the situation, didn't need her words to validate what he already knew. Respect isn't owed because of who someone is. It's owed because of who we choose to be. The message arrived on Marcus's phone late in the evening. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. I was wrong, and I regret it." He read it once, his expression unchanged. He didn't feel anger, nor did he feel satisfaction. It was just words. Words from someone who had finally faced the mirror of her own actions. Marcus didn't reply. Some lessons didn't need an audience. The next day, Marcus continued his work on the inclusion initiative for the entire store chain. In a conference room filled with regional managers, he spoke with quiet authority. "Respect isn't about knowing who someone is," he said. "It's about treating everyone like they matter, even when you know nothing about them. Because you never know what story they carry or what role they play in the bigger picture." The managers listened intently. A few nodded, recognizing the weight of his words. Meanwhile, at the original store, the atmosphere had shifted permanently. The staff made a conscious effort to greet every customer warmly, regardless of how they looked or what they carried. Even the regular shoppers noticed the difference. Linda, the cashier, shared the story with a new employee. "I saw firsthand how easily things can go wrong when you judge someone." It wasn't just embarrassing for her. It taught all of us a lesson we won't forget. Across the city, Karen sat at home, staring at her phone, waiting for a reply that would never come. The silence was louder than any response could have been. She thought about going back to the store to apologize in person, but deep down, she knew it wasn't about being forgiven. It was about realizing she had to change, truly change, if she didn't want this to define her. Later that week, Marcus visited a different store in the chain to review how staff training was progressing. He observed quietly as employees treated customers with patience and respect, offering help without assumptions. It was a small step, but he could see the shift happening. After the visit, Marcus walked through the city streets. He stopped briefly at a small community center where local youth gathered. He donated quietly, not for recognition, but because he believed in building places where dignity was never questioned. That evening, Richard called Marcus. "I wanted to thank you again," he said. "What started as an ugly moment turned into something that's making all of us better. You've reminded us what true leadership looks like." Marcus replied simply, "It's not about me. It's about what we choose to learn from what happens to us. As night fell, Marcus sat on his balcony with a cup of tea, looking out over the city lights. He thought briefly of Karen, not with anger, but with a calm understanding that life had already taught her what she needed to know. And in that quiet moment, Marcus felt no need for revenge, no need for validation, because true dignity didn't need to be defended. It simply was. The following week, Marcus returned to his office, where his assistant handed him a folder filled with updates. The Inclusion and Cultural Training Initiative was being rolled out across every store in the chain, and early reports showed a noticeable improvement in customer feedback. People are already noticing the difference, his assistant said. They say the stores feel more welcoming now. Marcus nodded, scanning the reports briefly. That's good, but this can't just be a quick fix. We have to keep reinforcing it until it becomes the standard, not the exception. Meanwhile, at the original store, Linda greeted a diverse group of customers with an easy smile. She'd made it a personal goal to ensure no one who walked through those doors ever felt the kind of hostility Karen had shown. She even began helping train new employees, sharing the story of what happened as a lesson on humility and respect. Across town, Karen sat in a quiet cafe. She overheard two people at a nearby table talking about the incident at the store. "Did you hear how calm he stayed?" one said. "He didn't even have to defend himself. The truth just revealed itself." And she was the one who ended up embarrassed. Karen lowered her eyes to her coffee. It was strange hearing herself described as she, almost like a cautionary character in someone else's story. She had become an example of what not to do, and there was no undoing that. Back in his office, Marcus prepared for a meeting with the regional directors. He planned to share a personal message about why respect mattered beyond policies and training. When the meeting began, he spoke plainly. Judgment is easy. It takes no effort to look at someone and decide who you think they are. But it takes strength to pause, to listen, and to see a person for who they really are. If this company wants to thrive, that's the kind of strength we have to choose every day. The room stayed silent for a moment before one director finally said, "This isn't just about the stores, is it? It's about how we all live beyond work." Marcus nodded. Exactly. Later that afternoon, he stopped by the original store once more. The manager greeted him with a respectful smile. "Things are different here now. I think people really learned from what happened." Marcus glanced around the aisles, watching customers being treated with patience and kindness. "Good," he said softly. "That's all I ever wanted." As he left, Marcus passed the exact spot where Karen had confronted him. He paused for a brief second, then walked out into the sunlight, leaving the memory behind without resentment. Karen, meanwhile, sat in her empty apartment that evening. She finally understood that respect, once lost, couldn't be demanded back. It had to be rebuilt from the ground up. And in two very different places, two very different people reflected on the same lesson. Who you choose to be, in the smallest moments, defines you far more than who you pretend to be in the big ones. The next morning, Marcus arrived at a regional leadership summit organized by the company. It was a gathering of managers and supervisors from all locations, aimed at sharing best practices. This year, Marcus had been asked to give the opening talk. As he stepped onto the small stage, the room fell silent. He didn't speak with theatrics or demand attention. His calm presence was enough to hold the room. "I want to share a story," Marcus began. "Not about business metrics or profit margins, but about a simple trip to one of our stores. A trip that reminded me how quickly people can assume the worst about someone they don't know." He paused, scanning the room. "A woman confronted me, loudly and publicly, because she thought I didn't belong. She didn't know my name. She didn't know my history. She didn't care. But when she found out who I was, suddenly her tone changed. And that's the problem. Respect should never depend on someone's title or status." The room was silent. Some managers shifted uncomfortably, knowing they'd made similar snap judgments in their own careers. Marcus continued, his voice steady. "I tell you this because leadership isn't just about making decisions. It's about how you treat people, especially when you think no one is watching. It's in the quiet moments, the everyday encounters, where your true character shows." When he finished, there was a long, thoughtful pause before the room erupted in quiet, respectful applause. After the session, several managers approached him. One said, "I've been in this job for 15 years, and I've never thought about how my tone affects the people I work with. I want to do better." Marcus nodded. It's never too late to start seeing people differently. Meanwhile, Karen sat at a small library downtown, filling out another job application. She was trying to rewrite her resume, to reframe her experience without revealing why she'd been dismissed. But deep down, she knew the truth would follow her no matter how she phrased her qualifications. Later that afternoon, Marcus returned to the original store. He noticed how much the staff had changed in their interactions, greeting customers warmly, offering help without assumptions, moving with a genuine sense of care. Linda, the cashier, smiled when she saw him. "Mr. Reed, you'll be glad to know we've been holding weekly team talks," she said. "We share stories, check ourselves, and make sure this place feels good for everyone." Marcus gave a slight nod. That's what lasting change looks like. Not just rules, but habits. As he walked out, he passed the same automatic doors where Karen had stormed out days ago. The memory felt distant now, like a shadow that had lost its weight. Across town, Karen sat quietly on a park bench, staring at the people passing by. For the first time, she noticed how many strangers she had once dismissed without thought. And in two different places, two very different people reflected on the same truth. Moments pass, but the way we treat others leaves a mark that lasts far longer. The following week, Marcus returned to his office early. A stack of thank you emails from store managers awaited him. Notes about how the new culture training was already making a visible difference. One message stood out. "For the first time, my team feels like they can speak freely without fear of being judged. I didn't realize how much damage had been done until I saw what respect could do." Marcus read it twice, quietly reflecting on how a single unpleasant moment had sparked a chain reaction for the better. Meanwhile, at the original store, Linda was hosting a short staff meeting. She shared her own experience witnessing Karen's outburst. "What I learned from that day," she told her team, "is that the way we treat people in the smallest moments says more about us than anything else. Let's not forget that." Her coworkers nodded. They'd all seen how quickly Karen's confidence had crumbled, and how effortlessly Marcus had held his dignity without ever raising his voice. Across town, Karen was sitting in a coffee shop, laptop open in front of her. She had just finished yet another interview, and she could tell from the polite smiles and vague responses that it hadn't gone well. She overheard a couple at the next table quietly talking about that woman who caused a scene in the store. Her chest tightened. She was no longer just Karen Miller. She was that woman, a cautionary story whispered in quiet corners. Later that day, Marcus was invited to a televised panel discussion about diversity and inclusion in public spaces. When the host asked him how he remained calm in the face of public humiliation, Marcus answered simply, "Because anger doesn't change people, it only hardens them. But dignity makes them stop and think. And sometimes, thinking is the first step toward change." The audience stayed silent for a moment before breaking into soft applause. After the panel, a young man approached Marcus backstage. "I've been in situations like that," he said. "I've lost my temper before, but seeing how you handled it, it gives me hope that there's another way." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Your worth isn't measured by someone else's ignorance. It's measured by how you choose to carry yourself when faced with it." That evening, Marcus visited the community center he often supported. He quietly funded a new program to teach young people about self-respect and resilience in the face of discrimination. He didn't announce it, didn't seek recognition. He simply believed that real change began in the hearts of those who would carry it forward. Meanwhile, Karen sat alone in her apartment, scrolling aimlessly through her phone. She paused when she saw an online article praising Marcus for his calm leadership. His face was everywhere now. On business pages, in community news, he had become a symbol of grace under pressure. And Karen realized something she couldn't deny anymore. Her moment of arrogance had become her lasting legacy, while his quiet dignity had become his strength. The next morning, Marcus woke up to find his inbox flooded with messages from people who had watched the panel discussion. Some were words of gratitude. Others were personal stories of moments where they, too, had been judged unfairly. One message read, "You gave me hope that staying calm doesn't mean staying silent. Thank you for showing there's power in dignity." Marcus read it quietly and smiled faintly. It reminded him why he chose to handle things the way he did. Later that day, Marcus visited the original store again. He didn't go there to check up on anyone. He simply wanted to see how the atmosphere had evolved. When he walked in, the staff greeted him warmly. Customers were being assisted with patience and kindness. It felt different. Linda approached him with a genuine smile. "Mr. Reed, things have really changed here. People still talk about what happened, but they talk about it as a lesson, not just gossip." Marcus nodded. "That's good. A bad moment is only wasted if nothing comes from it." Meanwhile, across town, Karen was at yet another job interview. She dressed her best and spoke confidently, but she saw the same look in the interviewer's eyes, a polite detachment. They ended the meeting with the same carefully chosen words, "We'll be in touch." As she walked out of the office building, Karen passed two employees chatting in the lobby. "Did you hear about that woman who embarrassed herself at the store?" one said. Karen's stomach dropped. It didn't matter that they didn't know she was standing right there. She could feel her past following her like a shadow. Back at Marcus's office, Richard stopped by with good news. "The board approved the full rollout of your program. You'll be overseeing the entire implementation across the company. It's already being recognized as one of the most impactful initiatives we've ever had." Marcus replied calmly, "I'm glad it's helping. Just make sure it doesn't become a headline that fades. It has to stay real, day after day. Richard nodded. That's why you're the one leading it. Later in the evening, Marcus attended a quiet dinner with community leaders. One of them asked, "How do you keep your composure when people treat you unfairly?" Marcus sipped his tea before answering, "Because I know who I am. Their judgment doesn't define me, but how I respond defines me." That night, as Marcus left the dinner, he walked through the city streets in silence. He thought about Karen for only a fleeting moment, not with anger, but with a calm understanding that life had already delivered the lesson she needed. Across the city, Karen sat in her dimly lit apartment, staring at an untouched dinner. She realized she had spent years believing her loudness was strength, when in reality, it was weakness. And now, silence was all she had left. Marcus, on the other hand, carried his silence like a shield, a quiet power that had turned one ugly moment into lasting change. The next day, Marcus visited a regional training session where store managers and staff were gathered to learn about the new Respect and Inclusion initiative. As he walked into the room, conversation stopped, and all eyes turned toward him, not out of fear, but out of quiet admiration. The facilitator introduced him warmly. "This is the mind whose experience sparked this change. Please welcome Mr. Marcus Reed." Marcus didn't give a long speech. Instead, he spoke plainly. "What happened to me was just one moment, but it wasn't about me. It was about how easily we can forget that everyone who crosses our path deserves the same dignity we want for ourselves. We can't undo the past, but we can choose what we do in the next moment. That choice defines us." The room stayed silent. Some nodded thoughtfully, others looked down, reflecting on times they'd made similar assumptions. After the session, a young employee approached Marcus. "I want to be honest," she said quietly. "Before all this, I never questioned my own biases. But your story made me think about the small ways I've judged people without knowing them. I'm sorry for that." Marcus smiled gently. "Awareness is the first step. What matters is what you choose to do differently now." Meanwhile, Karen sat in her car outside a small local market. She hesitated before going in, half expecting judgmental stares. She hadn't been back to any large stores since the incident. Even a normal shopping trip felt heavy now, as if the memory of her own behavior lingered everywhere. Back at Marcus's office, Richard stopped by with more updates. "The press picked up on the changes we're making, Wissam," he said. "They're calling it one of the best examples of turning a negative situation into meaningful growth. You're being invited to speak at a national conference on workplace culture." Marcus leaned back slightly, considering it. "If it helps people understand the value of real respect, I'll do it. But it's not about recognition, it's about impact." That evening, Marcus took a quiet walk through the neighborhood near the original store. He passed by a small park where families were gathered, children laughing. For a brief moment, he stopped and watched, reminded that the simplest spaces, stores, parks, sidewalks, were the places where kindness mattered most. Karen, meanwhile, returned home to an empty apartment. She sat at her kitchen table with her phone in her hand, scrolling through headlines. Marcus's face appeared on a news article about his initiatives. She felt a pang of regret, not just for how she treated him, but for realizing she could have chosen a different path that day. She could have been kind, but she hadn't. Marcus didn't dwell on her. He didn't need to, because true justice wasn't about seeing someone else fall. It was about seeing a better standard rise in their place. And now, that standard was spreading far beyond one store. A week later, Marcus stood backstage at a national conference on workplace culture. The room beyond the curtain was filled with business leaders, community organizers, and educators, all waiting to hear how a single incident in a small store had sparked meaningful change. When Marcus walked onto the stage, the crowd grew quiet. He didn't speak like a polished motivational speaker. Instead, his words were simple, deliberate. "I didn't expect a shopping trip to become a lesson for an entire company," he began. "But that's the thing about moments. They don't warn you, they reveal you. And in that store, one person revealed her assumptions. But more importantly, everyone watching saw how dignity reveals itself too, quietly, without shouting, without revenge." The audience stayed silent, hanging on every word. Marcus continued, "What I learned that day is this: true respect doesn't depend on who someone is, what they own, or what they can do for you. It's the starting point for every human interaction. And when we fail at that, we fail at the most basic part of being human." When he finished, the applause was soft but genuine, not the kind for a flashy speech, but for words that had truly resonated. Meanwhile, Karen was at a small networking event in her neighborhood, trying to rebuild her professional connections. She overheard someone mentioning Marcus's conference appearance. "They say he turned a terrible experience into something incredible," one woman said. "Now, his name is being recognized nationally for how he handled it." Karen lowered her gaze. It stung, not because Marcus was getting recognition, but because she had been the cause of the humiliation that led to his rise. Back at the company, Marcus's initiatives continued to grow. Linda sent him a message from the original store. "Customers are noticing. They're saying the staff feels more welcoming now. I think you've started something bigger than anyone expected." Marcus replied simply, "That's what happens when people choose to see each other differently." Later that day, Marcus was invited to a small gathering at the community center he supported. Young people from different backgrounds listened as he shared his experience. "You can't control how others see you," he told them, "but you can control how you respond. And your response can change more than just that moment. It can change the people around you too." After the talk, a teenager approached him shyly. "I've been treated like I don't belong so many times," she said. "But hearing you, it makes me feel like I don't have to lose myself to their judgment." Marcus smiled softly. "Never lose yourself. That's the one thing they can't take unless you give it away." As the evening drew to a close, Marcus walked outside into the cool night air. Karen, at the same time, returned to her empty apartment, her inbox filled with polite rejections. Two people, forever linked by one moment, one finding strength and purpose, the other left to confront the emptiness her actions had created. The following morning, Marcus returned to his office to find a letter waiting for him. It wasn't from a manager or a community leader. It was from a customer who had been in the store the day of the incident. "I was there when that woman yelled at you. I didn't speak up, and I regret it. But I want you to know that seeing how calm you stayed made me think about my own silence. I won't stay quiet next time." Marcus read it slowly, then set it down with a thoughtful expression. Change wasn't always immediate or loud, but it spread like ripples on water. Meanwhile, the original store had embraced the new culture fully. Linda and her team had started a small community board inside the store where customers could share positive messages or suggestions. It was a simple gesture, but it made the space feel welcoming in a way it never had before. Across town, Karen sat in a modest office space she had rented to start consulting. She was trying to rebuild her career from scratch, but every time she introduced herself, she wondered if people already knew her story. The confidence she once carried like armor was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable awareness of how others might see her. Later that day, Marcus held a small meeting with his closest team members. "I don't want this initiative to just live inside these walls," he said. "We need to bring this message to every part of the community, schools, local businesses, anywhere people interact. Respect shouldn't be something you switch on at work and off everywhere else. It has to be part of who you are." Priya nodded. "We can partner with local organizations. I know a few schools that would welcome workshops like this." "Let's make it happen," Marcus replied. Later that evening, Marcus walked into the same store where it all began. The atmosphere was completely different now. Lighter, friendlier. Employees greeted every customer warmly, offering help without hesitation. Linda smiled when she saw him. "Mr. Reed, it's good to see you again. Things have really changed here." Marcus looked around at the friendly interactions happening all over the store. "Good. That's what matters." As he left, he glanced briefly at the spot where Karen had stood, loud and certain of her assumptions. It felt like a distant memory now, one that had lost its sting. That night, Marcus sat on his balcony with a cup of tea, reflecting on how far things had come from a single, ugly moment. Across the city, Karen sat in her empty apartment, staring at the blinking cursor on her laptop as she tried to write a plan for her next steps. Two lives still connected by one encounter. One turning it into growth, the other struggling to escape the shadow of her own actions. And in the quiet of the night, it was clear which path led to peace. The next week, Marcus visited a local high school that had invited him to speak. The principal had heard about his calm handling of the store incident and wanted students to hear his perspective on respect, judgment, and resilience. Standing in front of the assembly hall filled with teenagers, Marcus spoke in the same steady, thoughtful way he always did. "Respect isn't about who someone appears to be," he said. "It's about how you choose to see them. Every person you meet carries a story you don't know, and the way you treat them says more about your story than theirs." The students stayed silent, their usual restlessness replaced by curiosity. Afterward, several came up to him to thank him, some even sharing their own experiences of being misjudged. Meanwhile, at the original store, Linda noticed how even regular customers seemed friendlier. She saw neighbors who used to avoid eye contact now stopping to help each other with groceries or chat in line. It was as if one moment of ugliness had awakened an entire community to the importance of kindness. Across town, Karen sat in a small, unfamiliar office waiting for yet another interview. She clutched her resume in her hands, knowing it didn't tell the whole story, knowing the weight of her reputation was heavier than any qualification she could list. When the interviewer finally called her in, the questions were polite but detached. By the end, the same familiar phrase came, "We'll let you know." And Karen knew what that really meant. Later that afternoon, Marcus met with Richard to review the progress of the company-wide initiative. "The reports are in," Richard said. "Customer satisfaction has gone up across all locations. Employees are more engaged. You've started something bigger than I think even you realized." Marcus nodded calmly. It was never just about one store. It's about what happens in every small interaction. That's where real change lives. As evening fell, Marcus walked past the community center. Children played outside, their laughter filling the air. He stopped for a moment, reminded that the future was being shaped in small, ordinary spaces like this, not in boardrooms or headlines, but in how people chose to treat one another every day. That same evening, Karen returned to her apartment and sat in the dim light of her living room. She scrolled through social media and saw Marcus's name again, this time in an article about his new youth mentorship program. The headline called him a voice for respect in everyday life. Karen put the phone down slowly. She felt a deep, uncomfortable realization settle in her chest. While she was stuck in the same place, Marcus had turned the moment she tried to diminish him into something far greater than either of them. Two people, one defining encounter. One had grown beyond it, lifting others with him. The other was still trapped, held back by the weight of her own choices. The next morning, Marcus prepared for another community event. This time, a workshop at the local library aimed at small business owners. He wanted to share how simple principles of respect and inclusion could strengthen not only their teams, but their relationships with the communities they served. When he arrived, the room was filled with a diverse group of people. Some came with notepads ready, others just wanted to listen. Marcus stood at the front, speaking with the same calm confidence that had carried him through every situation. Leadership, he began, isn't about control. It's about how you make others feel in your presence. It's easy to demand respect when you hold power, but true respect is earned when you treat people well, even when you think no one is watching. There was a pause, the room quiet as his words settled. After the workshop, a woman approached him. "I own a small cafe," she said. "I've been guilty of making assumptions about people. Today made me realize how much that shapes the atmosphere I create. I want to do better." Marcus gave her an encouraging nod. Awareness is the start. Action is what keeps it alive. Meanwhile, at the original store, Linda and the staff had organized a small charity drive, inviting customers to donate supplies for a local shelter. The idea came from wanting to turn their store into more than just a place to shop, a place that truly served its community. Across town, Karen sat in another waiting area for an interview. She watched the receptionist greet each candidate with warmth and professionalism. It was the kind of simple kindness she had once dismissed as unimportant. Now, she felt its absence in her own life. When her turn came, the interviewer scanned her resume and asked, "Can you tell us about your leadership philosophy?" Karen hesitated, realizing she didn't have an honest answer anymore. Whatever she might have said before felt hollow now. She stumbled through her response, but deep down, she knew. The damage to her reputation wasn't just external. It had reshaped how she saw herself. Later that evening, Marcus met with Richard again to finalize plans for expanding the initiative to other regions. "Marcus," Richard said, "you've turned one negative moment into a company-wide shift. I don't think you realize how many people you've inspired." Marcus replied simply, "I didn't do it for inspiration. I did it because it was necessary, because it should have been this way all along." As the night fell, Marcus took a quiet walk through the neighborhood near the store. He passed by families, neighbors greeting each other, and the soft glow of small businesses closing for the day. Karen, meanwhile, sat at her kitchen table, looking at yet another rejection email. She closed her laptop and stared at her reflection in the window. One moment in a store had rewritten both their paths, one toward growth and quiet influence, the other toward an uncomfortable reckoning with who she truly was. And the lesson remained the same. How you treat people in the smallest moments defines the legacy you leave behind. The next week, Marcus received an invitation to speak at a regional leadership summit. It wasn't about business success or profits. It was about culture and humanity in everyday interactions. He agreed, knowing the message needed to reach as many people as possible. At the summit, he spoke before a room filled with executives, managers, and community leaders. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. Every day, we have moments where we can choose kindness or choose to judge. Most people think the big decisions define who they are, but it's the small ones, the quiet moments, when no one's looking, show your true character. And if you don't see the humanity in someone before you know their title, then you've missed the whole point of respect. The audience was silent, some nodding, others lost in their own thoughts. They weren't just hearing a story, they were seeing themselves reflected in it. Meanwhile, the original store had become somewhat of a local symbol for positive change. The community board Linda started was now covered with notes of thanks from customers, messages like, "This store feels different," welcoming. The staff took pride in what they were building together. Karen, on the other hand, sat at her kitchen table, staring at an unopened letter. It was from a former colleague, someone she had once dismissed with the same coldness she had shown Marcus. She hesitated to open it, knowing it likely contained more disappointment. She finally tore it open and read the single line. Actions always return to their source. I hope you've learned. Karen folded the letter quietly and placed it aside. For the first time, she felt the full weight of the isolation she had created for herself. Later that day, Marcus stopped by the store for the last time before leaving on a trip to oversee the rollout of his initiatives in other regions. Linda greeted him warmly. "Mr. Reed," she said, "thank you for trusting us to do better. This place really has changed since that day." Marcus smiled faintly. "It's not about trusting me. It's about trusting yourselves to choose better. You've done that." As he left the store, Marcus glanced at the automatic doors where Karen's angry words had once echoed. Now, they were just doors. Ordinary, unremarkable. The moment had passed, but the impact remained. That evening, Marcus packed his bag for the trip. He sat for a moment on the edge of his bed, thinking about how far things had come from one single ugly encounter. It hadn't just changed the store. It had changed an entire network of people who now understood the power of everyday respect. Across town, Karen sat in the dim glow of her apartment, the silence pressing in on her. She opened her phone to see Marcus's name in yet another article, this time titled "From Humiliation to Healing: How One Man Changed a Company's Culture." And she realized, painfully, that while her name would fade into whispers, his would remain as a reminder of what dignity could achieve. The morning of Marcus's trip arrived quietly. The sun filtered through his apartment windows, casting soft streaks of gold across the room. He packed his final few things, slipping a folder of notes into his briefcase. Today, he would travel to the company's headquarters to finalize the nationwide rollout of the inclusion initiative he had started. As he prepared to leave, Marcus paused for a moment by his balcony. He looked out at the city, at the neighborhoods, the small businesses, the places where people crossed paths every day. So much of life happened in these ordinary moments, and so many lives were shaped by how people treated each other in those spaces. Meanwhile, at the original store, Linda was hosting a small morning meeting for her staff. She stood by the community board, now overflowing with notes from customers. "Look at this," she said, reading a few aloud. "Thank you for making me feel welcome." "This store feels like a community now." Her coworker smiled. It wasn't just a workplace anymore. It had become something more meaningful. Across town, Karen sat in her apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes. She had decided to move, hoping a new city might give her a fresh start. She picked up her phone and saw yet another article about Marcus's work. This one was titled, "The Quiet Power of Dignity: How One Man Changed an Entire Company." She stared at it for a long time. In that moment, she understood what she had lost. It wasn't just her reputation. It was the chance to be remembered for something good. At the airport, Marcus boarded his flight. As he sat by the window, a fellow passenger recognized him. "Excuse me," the man said softly. "You're Marcus Reed, right? I saw your talk online. It really made me think about how I treat people. I wanted to say thank you." Marcus smiled faintly. "I appreciate that. It's never too late to choose differently." When he arrived at the headquarters, the reception staff greeted him warmly. He was escorted into a large conference room where regional managers from across the country had gathered. They applauded as he entered, not out of formality, but out of genuine respect for the impact he had made. Richard stepped forward to introduce him. Marcus didn't ask for this role. He didn't seek the spotlight. But when confronted with ignorance, he chose dignity. And that choice inspired all of us to do better. Today, we're proud to announce that his initiative will become the standard for every store in our network. Marcus took the stage. He didn't give a long speech, just a few words that carried the weight of everything that had happened. What happened to me in a store was small compared to what many face every day. But it reminded me of this simple truth. Respect isn't optional. It's not earned by titles or wealth or recognition. It's what we owe each other as human beings. If we remember that, we don't just change companies, we change communities. The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted into genuine applause. Later that evening, Marcus walked through the quiet city streets near the headquarters. He thought about how far this journey had taken him, not from the top down, but from the inside out. He hadn't fought for revenge. He had chosen to build something lasting. Across the city he'd left behind, Karen loaded the last of her boxes into her car. She didn't know what her future held, only that she couldn't escape the lesson she had learned too late. One moment of arrogance could define you far longer than you imagined. Back in his hotel room, Marcus placed his tea on the table by the window. He looked out at the skyline, calm and at peace. He knew the work wasn't over. There would always be more moments, more challenges, more opportunities to choose respect over judgment. But for now, He allowed himself a quiet smile, because in the end, the loudest lesson hadn't come from Karen's outburst. It had come from his silence, the kind of silence that carried strength, that changed people not by force, but by example. And that was the legacy he would continue to build.